Hey, this is Jeremy Chanel, and these are all the things we wish we knew before we bought land.
So this video is going to be broken into two parts. The first part will be all about finding your land, how to go about that, where to look. And then the second part will be about researching a piece of land that you're potentially interested in buying, what things you should know before making an offer on it.
The first thing we wanted to talk about is working with a realtor. So that's something I didn't really want to do. I just wanted to kind of do it all myself, and that's because I kind of thought you had to pay. And that's the cool thing about working with a realtor is you don't, as the buyer, pay anything to them. The seller of the property gives them a cut when the property is sold. So that's how that works. There is kind of a disadvantage for some of them to sell raw land because they don't make as much. They're gonna make a lot more on a house. So that being said, some of the realtors actually do specialize in raw land or selling land. It's just kind of their niche. If you're in Washington or Oregon, we use the Homestead home group, and they are really knowledgeable about land and raw land and all that. So
the next thing is online tools to help you find and scout out pieces of land you might be interested in. So we really wanted a rural property, which made it hard to just drive around and look for sale signs because the properties are so spread out. So that's a good option because you will often find pieces of property that may not be online if you just find a for sale sign. The other option, which is much easier to find many more properties quickly, is all of the different online websites that now post rural raw land for sale. So our top three that we use the most were Zillow, Lands of America, I guess four. Zillow, Lands of America, Land Watch, and Craigslist. We saw pieces of property from all four of those places that we found properties online, but ultimately we found our property on Zillow and ended up connecting with a real estate agent who showed us another property that we hadn't seen.
So a big part of finding a piece of land is going to be networking, and it's a good idea to post on your social media accounts and ask your friends to ask their friends to see if there's any word of a piece of land that might fit your budget. We did that, and although that's not the route that ultimately landed us the property, it did put us into connections with people who did land us the property.
So now that you have found your piece of land or a piece of land you're potentially interested in seeing, we recommend doing some research before driving out there because potentially it's far away from you, and that could waste a lot of your time when you add up, 10 to 50 properties that you're seeing. So the first tip or tool that we recommend for researching your land is called GIS, and each county has a GIS website. So if you Google your county plus GIS, you should find it. And this tool is awesome, and there are so many things you can do with it. So I would recommend definitely playing around in it and getting comfortable for the counties that you're interested in considering looking at land in. And I wrote down a couple of things that I would recommend looking for that were important to us in our land. So we wanted something that was extremely quiet and peaceful. So that meant not near any high traffic roads, no highways for sure. And you can figure that out by looking at the satellite images on GIS and seeing what roads run near it, how busy are they potentially based on other roads that they meet up to, etc. The next thing was sun orientation. So we knew that we wanted a property that had great south-facing, preferably, sun orientation because we wanted to grow a lot of our own food. And here in the West, where we are in the US, their sunshine is gold. And so we knew that we wanted to have as much sunshine available as possible, which you can also figure out on GIS. So you can see the way that the land is contoured and which direction it's facing. So we were able to say, oh, this one is slightly sloped and it's facing south, so we're not even going to drive out and see it because we know it's probably going to be wet and frosty and not what we're looking for. Another thing that we wanted was at least partially treed. So you can see that our land has tons of trees on it. We weren't necessarily looking for something that was completely treed, but we wanted a bit of variety. So maybe some cleared areas and some treed areas. And again, you can see that on the GIS by looking at satellite imagery and seeing if there's evergreen or deciduous trees and make your decision that way. The next thing that was important to us was clean, healthy soil for growing our own food. So this one's kind of hard to figure out from the GIS tool, but one thing that can be an indicator is if there are any structures on the property. You can kind of make some informed guesses about what type of activity happened there. So if there was like multiple trailers on the property, you might be able to infer that there were multiple people living on this site. And so that might be an indicator that there was like trash left around, and you wouldn't really know that until you went to see the property, but it's something good that you can know ahead of time. Also, if any fields are planted with row crops, you would know that there was probably farming done. And so were they spraying pesticides? That was a big potential concern for us, and so we were able to figure that out again on GIS. The next thing that was important to us was rules or laws inhibiting raising farm animals. So we want to raise animals eventually, and we didn't want any local regulations that would inhibit that. So you can figure out where the property is located and look that up online. We also wanted a property that was not at risk of flooding at all. Again, because we're in a very wet area here, flooding, like if you're in a wetlands area, typically that area is going to be wet for 6 months of the year or more. That was not something that we wanted. The last two things was we wanted 5 acres or more with no large or intense slopes, and then we wanted just no structures or previous structures. So we really wanted to buy raw land to have kind of this clean slate where we could do with what we wanted and not have to tear down old structures or worry about how the previous owner had treated the land. So that was just what we were looking for. And then we also created a quick short list of what we recommend everyone look for at a bare minimum. And when I say look for, I mean do some research and know these things before deciding if you want to buy the property. So first, know if there's any delineated wetlands, which I had just talked about. Look at the past satellite imagery to determine if there are any structures now or have been in the past. So you can, for our property, we could go back like almost 100 years and see satellite images from different time periods. So we could see that there had never been any structures on our property, which is just super helpful information. Understand what's around the land and how you feel about this. So I already mentioned like high traffic roads. That was something we didn't want. Other residential properties or schools, other farms, other airports, private land, etc. All these things can impact noise level, how close your neighbors are to you and what kind of activities they're doing can really impact your day-to-day experience. Also know the contour or slope of your land to determine how flat or sloped it is, and again, this will depend on your unique circumstances and what you want. Also look up the zoning. So if you want to build on your piece of land, then you want to make sure that the zone allows for a residential structure that you can live in. So we actually found a couple of properties that looked amazing online and were super cheap, and then we realized it was because they weren't zoned for a home. So if we would have bought that without doing that research, we would have been out of luck and not been able to build on it. And then the last one is there a homeowners association or an HOA? If you're like us and you want to raise animals and do the homestead thing, then an HOA is probably not ideal because there's usually rules around things you can or can't do in the neighborhood. We actually do live in an HOA, which we never thought that we would, but our HOA is in a very rural area and is very lax and has no restrictions on farm animals or that sort of thing. So it actually worked for us. And if we had written it off and not done our research and looked at the specific HOA, then we maybe would have, missed on this property.
Here's a few more tips to consider before we buy land. Number one is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is, especially if you're looking to buy, like a good chunk of land out in the country or even semi-rural, Wi-Fi could be important to you. If it is, make sure to check if there's satellite or Ethernet or fiber rather internet available in the area. And obviously there's Starlink too. So another thing to consider is digging a well. If you plan on digging a well, then I would suggest looking at the neighbor's data for like their well data. You can look that up online or just go ahead and ask them the old-fashioned way and see what theirs is, and you can kind of get an estimate of how much that's going to cost. Ours costs a lot more than we were expecting, but kind of less in the same way. Like the kite just costs a lot to dig a well, and we were expecting 280 feet because our neighbors, 100 yards away was 280 feet. So we ended up digging it at 140, which is pretty cool, but it was really good to just be able to budget for that by, asking the neighbor and getting a quote from your well digging company. A third thing is getting a land survey or looking for survey records. We had a lot of trouble finding our property lines, even though we had a survey that was done. It was about 15 years old, and the markers were like, under 6 inches of mulch. So we ended up getting a metal detector to find some of those, but we finally feel like we've got the place mapped out, but if we didn't have that survey, we would have been shit out of luck. Lastly, you can go look at the recently sold properties in the area to kind of get a good estimate. It's gonna give you a real ballpark estimate because there's a lot of different factors that go into pricing a piece of land. But it's nice to be able to kind of get that ballpark. Oftentimes the listing will have like a estimate or a zestimate for Zillow, and that's really helpful too to negotiate if you plan on negotiating. One thing to think about if you're gonna offer lower than the listing price, which I suggest doing, but in some markets it'll get bought right out from under you if you aren't gonna snap it up and be the first person to offer full listing price. So yeah, there's always a lot of back and forth, at least there was for us, but we ended up offering less and got less for the property. So
the last recommendation that we would have is to follow your intuition. You can definitely experience analysis paralysis with this whole buying land thing and research way too much and stress yourself out and miss an opportunity potentially on a property that you really wanted, but someone else went and made an offer on it. So follow your gut, like do your due diligence, do all this research, go out and see the property, see how it feels to you, and if it's the right property, just trust that your offer will be accepted and the property will become your home. That's how it worked out for us. We actually did make an offer on a property in our community very close to us that I thought was the one, and when we went and saw it, I got emotional because it was, I thought, so perfect for us, and we made an offer and we didn't get it, someone else got it. And then we ended up finding this property that we're on now a few weeks later, having no idea that we would even be interested in this one. And so I think that the emotions that I felt from that property, like less than a half mile from us, was because we were like so close to this land, and we know that the property that we ended up with is so amazing, more than we could have ever like dreamed up or written out in our desires for what our property would have. So do your due diligence and kind of trust in the process, because it can take a while too. It actually didn't take us that long compared to some people. It took us like 4 or 5 months,
yeah,
when we started seriously looking and seeing land to having our property. So good luck, and if you have any other questions that we didn't answer, feel free to put them in the comments, and we're happy to share our knowledge on this some more.
Cause tomorrow I may fall down on my face.
You can start whenever.
Okay. My lips are like frozen. I feel like I can't talk. Consider is. I was so good. I saw your lip twitch.
I'm sorry.
See the survey.